The phone started ringing before the sun came up. I watched it vibrate across the small wooden table in my apartment. One call, then another, then another. I already knew who it was before I even looked. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat quietly by the window with a cup of plain tea, the kind with no sugar, and watched the early morning light slowly fill the room. The apartment was tiny. The paint on the walls was slightly cracked. A single fan turned lazily above me. For the first time in years, I could hear silence. No marble floors, no servants moving around, no heavy doors closing, just peace. The phone buzzed again. Charles Blake calling. I let it ring. Then another call came in immediately. Daniel Reed calling. I closed my eyes for a moment. It had begun. I whispered softly to myself. That was faster than I expected. I placed the phone face down on the table because everything happening right now started last night. The dinner. Yesterday evening looked normal. The dining table was perfect. I made sure it was. I always did. The glasses were polished, the plates were warm, the flowers were fresh. I had cooked everything myself. Roasted chicken, rice, vegetables, and soup. The house smelled warm and welcoming. Anyone entering would think we were a happy couple. Maybe once we were. Ethan sat at the head of the table, laughing with his business partner, Mr. Coleman. His wife sat beside him. They were kind people. They smiled at me often. I kept moving quietly between the kitchen and dining room, serving food. I didn't mind serving. I only minded one thing: being unseen. Halfway through dinner, Mrs. C. Coleman looked at me and asked kindly, "Naomi, what do you do all day? Do you work from home?" I opened my mouth, but Ethan answered first. He laughed. "No, she doesn't work. She stays at home. Business would confuse her." Everyone chuckled lightly. I smiled politely. I've learned something important about people. Sometimes silence protects dignity better than arguing. So I stayed quiet. I placed more food on the table. Then Mr. Coleman said jokingly, "You're lucky, Naomi. You married success." Ethan leaned back proudly in his chair and raised his glass. "I take care of her. Honestly," he said, smiling, "she wouldn't survive a month without me." Everyone laughed. This time, I didn't. I kept my eyes on the tablecloth so nobody would notice, but something inside me became very still, not hurt, not anger, a decision. Dinner continued. Conversation continued. I cleaned the plates, I poured drinks, I said nothing, but I remembered every word. After the guests left, the front door closed. The house became quiet. I stood in the kitchen washing dishes slowly. The warm water ran over my hands. I focused on the sound of it. Ethan walked in, loosening his tie. "You were quiet tonight," he said casually. "I was listening," I answered. He leaned against the counter. "You should talk more. People may think you don't understand things." I turned off the water and dried my hands carefully. Then I finally told him the truth. "You embarrassed me." He looked confused. "What?" "At dinner." He shrugged. "I was joking. You said I couldn't survive without you." He laughed lightly. "Naomi, you don't work. You don't manage bills. I handle everything. Why are you upset about facts?" I looked at him. For a long moment, I searched his face. Not for anger, for respect. I didn't find it. He sighed, slightly annoyed. "If you feel that strongly," he said, gesturing toward the front door. "Go ahead. Walk away." He smiled a little. "You wouldn't last a month without me." The house became very quiet. I felt calm, very calm, because something inside me finally settled. I picked up my house keys. I walked to the kitchen counter, and I placed them down. The small metallic sound echoed in the room. I looked at him and said gently, "Thank you for taking care of me all this time." He waited for tears. I didn't give him any. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't argue. I simply walked to the door, opened it, and left the house. I didn't look back, not because I was angry, because I was done. The morning after, I slept peacefully. That surprised me. No anxiety, no regret, just quiet. Then the phone calls started. I finally picked up my phone and checked my messages. 42 missed calls. From Ethan. 18 from Charles. 9 from Daniel, and 6 from a number I knew very well. The bank. I took a slow sip of tea. Right on time. My phone rang again. I answered this one. "Good morning, Mrs. Harlow." The woman on the other side sounded almost relieved. "Miss Carter, we've been trying to reach you urgently. The guarantor authorizations have stopped. We need confirmation immediately. Blake Holdings' credit lines are suspended." "I understand," I said calmly. There was hesitation in her voice. "Should we proceed with withdrawal protection removal?" I looked out the window at the rising sun. "Yes," I replied gently. "You may proceed." Her breathing changed slightly. "All of it?" "Yes." I ended the call. Silence returned to the room. I placed my phone on the table. Somewhere across the city, everything in Ethan's world was beginning to shake. Not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time, I stopped holding it together. People think my life began the day I married Ethan. It didn't. My life began long before he ever knew my name. I first saw Blake Holdings on a rainy afternoon 3 years ago. I was sitting in a quiet corner of a public library, the kind nobody notices. I like places where people don't ask questions. I had my laptop open, a notebook beside me, and a cup of cold coffee I had already forgotten to drink. I wasn't reading novels. I was studying financial reports. Most people would find them boring. Pages of numbers, charts, legal notes, small details hidden in long paragraphs. But numbers talk. If you listen carefully, they tell you when someone is lying and when a company is about to fall apart. Blake Holdings caught my attention because it didn't make sense. The company should have failed. The risk exposure was too high. Their shipping contracts were unstable. A few poor decisions could have pushed them into bankruptcy within months. Yet every time the company moved close to danger, something corrected it. Quietly. No public announcement, no new executive hired, no visible change, just recovery. That kind of pattern doesn't happen by accident. So I kept watching. I followed their public deals. I read legal filings. I tracked supplier movements. After a few weeks, I noticed something interesting. Most of the risky decisions came from one person. Ethan Blake. At first, I thought he was reckless. Then I realized something else. He wasn't reckless. He was confident, too confident. He believed problems would always fix themselves. And strangely, they always did. I wanted to know why. So I did something I rarely do. I stepped into his world. The first meeting. It happened at a charity event. I wore a simple blue dress, nothing expensive. I tied my hair back and wore almost no makeup. I knew how people in those places thought. The less noticeable you are, the more invisible you become. Ethan was easy to find. He was surrounded by people, smiling, laughing, shaking hands. He looked exactly like the magazines described, successful, charming, admired. But I wasn't watching his smile. I was watching his eyes, confident, carefree, a man who had never truly lost anything. I walked toward the refreshment table and pretended to struggle with my drink tray. A glass tipped. Before it could fall, a hand caught it. "Careful," he said. I looked up at him. For the first time, Ethan Blake looked at me. "I'm sorry," I said softly. He smiled. "You're fine. First time at one of these events?" I nodded. That was not a lie. He asked my name. "Naomi." He repeated it once, like he wanted to remember it. "Naomi, nice to meet you." We talked for 10 minutes. He did most of the talking. I mostly listened. And in those 10 minutes, I confirmed something important. Ethan wasn't a bad person. He was kind. He paid attention when I spoke. He walked me to the door when I said I was leaving. But he also lived inside a very safe reality, one where consequences rarely reached him. He didn't know how close his company had come to collapse several times, and he didn't know why it survived. That night, when I returned to my apartment, I opened my laptop. I made a decision. I would get closer, not for money, for understanding. The relationship. Ethan called the next day, then the next, then every day after that. He liked how quiet I was. He said I was calming. He said I was different. I never corrected him. He took me to restaurants, parks, long drives. He told me his business problems sometimes, not in detail, just frustration when deals felt stressful. He never realized something. The next morning, those exact problems always solved themselves. A delayed shipment suddenly cleared customs. A partner who planned to withdraw suddenly stayed. A legal issue quietly disappeared. He thought it was luck. It wasn't. Late at night, after he slept, I worked. I reviewed contracts. I contacted people who owed favors. I adjusted negotiations through anonymous channels. I never used my name, only initials. NC, not because I wanted credit, because I wanted distance. I didn't want him to feel small. I wanted to know something much more important. Would he value me without knowing what I was doing? Months passed. He trusted me completely. He laughed easily around me. He told me things he didn't tell others. Sometimes he would fall asleep on the couch while I read beside him. Those moments felt real. Then one evening, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. Not because I needed his wealth, because I still believed something. Respect can grow. The marriage. After the wedding, I moved into the large house. It was beautiful, but I kept my life simple. I cooked, but I cleaned. I listened. I never corrected him when he spoke about his smart decisions. Every time his company faced danger, I quietly intervened again. A lawsuit that could destroy them, settled privately, a bank risk review, reassessed, a supply chain failure, rerouted overnight. He celebrated victories. I watched him celebrate, and I waited. I was not testing his intelligence. I was waiting for one small thing, recognition, not for my work, for me. I didn't need him to know what I did. I only needed him to see my worth beyond dependency. For a long time, I thought he did. Then came the dinner. The moment. Everything changed. The laughter at the table wasn't what hurt. It was how easily he said it, how natural it felt to him. She wouldn't survive a month without me. Not a joke, a belief. That was the moment I understood something clearly. He loved me, but he didn't respect me. And love without respect becomes ownership. That is something I cannot accept. I have one rule I've never broken in my life. I never stay where I am not respected. So I left. Not to punish him, not to prove anything, simply because the answer to my question had arrived. And once you know the truth, you cannot pretend you don't. That morning, after the calls began, I opened my laptop on the small apartment desk. Several urgent emails waited. Company alerts, contract freezes, emergency meeting requests. I calmly logged into a secure account I had not used in years inside that house. Messages immediately appeared. Daniel Reed. Urgent. Please respond. Crest National Bank. Authorization required. Charles Blake. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I closed the laptop, because before I decided what to do next, someone knocked on my apartment door. Slow, careful, not angry. I walked toward it, and I already knew who was standing outside. I stood in front of the door for a few seconds before opening it. I already knew. Ethan never knocked softly, so it wasn't him. When I opened the door, Charles Blake was standing in the hallway. For the first time since I met him, he did not look like the strong, composed man everyone respected. His suit jacket was slightly wrinkled, his tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept. He looked past me into the apartment, then back at me. "You're really here," he said quietly. "Yes," I answered. He didn't move. He just stared at me, as if trying to match two different pictures in his head. "The building manager said you moved in this morning," he said. I nodded. The hallway was silent. A neighbor's television played faintly behind a wall somewhere far away. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He entered slowly and stopped near the small table by the window. His eyes scanned everything: the old couch, the small fan, the simple cup of tea, the laptop. He looked confused. "You chose this?" he asked. "Yes." "You left that house? For this?" "I left the house," I corrected gently. "This is just where I am staying." He turned toward me fully now. "Naomi, do you understand what is happening right now?" "Yes." His expression tightened. "Our accounts are frozen. 3 partners withdrew. The shipping insurance was canceled this morning. Oh, the bank says a guarantor disappeared. Daniel Reed is demanding an emergency meeting and won't explain why. And my son—" He stopped speaking. I waited. "My son cannot even access his own executive authorization," he finished quietly. I pulled the chair out for him. "You should sit. You look tired." He didn't sit. Instead, he asked the question he had clearly been holding since he arrived. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said calmly. He stared at me, searching my face. "Naomi, I'm not accusing you. I am asking you. All of this started last night, the exact moment you left that house." I didn't respond immediately. He noticed, and I saw the moment something in his mind connected. His voice lowered. "You know something." I poured hot water into another cup and placed it in front of him. "I know many things." He didn't touch the tea. "Daniel Reed keeps asking for someone called NC. He says that person has been protecting major corporate risks for 2 years. He believes if he doesn't reach them today, multiple companies could collapse." I remained quiet. Charles swallowed slowly. "And this morning," he continued, "the bank confirmed that the guarantor backing our corporate credit lines used the same initials." The room was very still. He looked at me carefully now, not like a daughter-in-law, but like a puzzle. "Naomi," he said almost cautiously, "what is your full name?" "Naomi Carter." His fingers tightened slightly against the table. "NC." I said nothing. He took a slow breath. "No, that's coincidence," he said, but his voice no longer believed his own words. "It must be." His phone suddenly rang in his hand. He glanced at the screen and answered immediately. "Daniel." I could hear the voice faintly through the phone, loud even from a distance. "Is she there?" Daniel Reed asked urgently. Charles froze. He looked at me while still holding the phone. "Yes." There was a sharp breath on the other side. "Do not let her leave," Daniel said quickly. "I'm on my way." The call ended. Charles slowly lowered the phone. He looked at me in a way he never had before, not confused, not doubtful, afraid. "Naomi," he said quietly, "who are you?" I sat down across from him. "I'm the same person I've always been." "That's not possible." I folded my hands calmly. "Mr. Blake, may I ask you something?" He nodded slowly. 3 months ago, your northern shipping contract failed during the port strike. Do you remember?" His eyes widened slightly. "We recovered unexpectedly." "Yes. And last year, the lawsuit from Harrington Logistics?" "That was settled privately," he said, still watching me carefully. "And the investment partner in Singapore who suddenly stayed after planning to withdraw?" He didn't answer immediately this time, because now he knew those events were not public information. Only a very small number of people knew the details. His breathing became slow. "You knew about those?" "Yes." "How?" I met his eyes. "Because I handled them." He didn't speak. I could actually see his mind working, replaying memories. The nights I was awake, the times I quietly asked small questions at dinner, the moments I suggested Ethan reconsider certain decisions without explaining why. He sat down heavily. "No," he whispered. No. That would mean, I said gently, you were not wrong about your company surviving. Oh, it just didn't survive the way you believed. His voice was barely audible. You were protecting us? I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked him, do you remember the first time you told Ethan he was ready to lead alone? He nodded slowly. That was the week your largest creditor almost called their loan. His head snapped up toward me. I continued softly. The reason they didn't was because I personally guaranteed the risk. Silence filled the apartment. The fan hummed quietly above us. Charles stared at me like he was looking at someone completely new. That guarantor, he said carefully, the one the bank is asking about. Yes. His hand trembled slightly on the table. Then when you left last night, I withdrew my authorization. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the powerful CEO looked like an exhausted father. You weren't living in our house, he said quietly. No, we were living safely because you allowed it. I didn't answer. His phone rang again. He didn't even check the screen before answering. Yes? Ethan's voice was loud and panicked through the speaker. Dad! Everything is shutting down. Our main client canceled. I can't log into the executive system and the bank won't release funds. What is happening? Charles looked at me while holding the phone. He didn't reply immediately. Dad? Charles spoke slowly. Ethan, what exactly did you say to your wife last night? There was a pause. Why does that matter right now? Charles closed his eyes. Because, he said quietly, I think you just fired the person holding your entire world together. I didn't go back to the door after Charles left. I stood in the middle of the apartment for a long time, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairwell. The building became quiet again. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle passed, and a child laughed in the distance. My phone was still on the table. It began ringing almost immediately. I already knew who it was this time. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Naomi. His voice was strained, almost unsteady. Ethan. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear noise behind him. Voices, movement, doors opening and closing. It sounded like he was inside the office. I've been calling you all morning, he said. I know. Why didn't you answer? I needed quiet. He exhaled shakily. Everything is falling apart here. I stayed silent. Our accounts are locked. The bank won't release funds. Dad won't explain anything properly. Daniel Reed is coming personally. Naomi, I don't understand what is happening. I looked out the window at the sunlight touching the rooftops across the street. You will, I said gently. Did I do something? He asked. The question hung in the air. Not angry, not proud, just confused. Yes, I answered softly. Another silence followed. Because of what I said? Yes. His breathing slowed. I didn't mean it, he said quickly. It was a joke. I was just talking. You know how business dinners are. I wasn't serious. I closed my eyes briefly. I believe you, I told him. Then why is this happening? He asked, almost pleading now. I didn't answer that. Instead, I said, I didn't cause anything, Ethan. I simply stopped preventing it. He didn't understand. I could hear it in his silence. What does that mean? He asked. You built your company believing the ground beneath you was solid, I said calmly. You never noticed someone was holding it steady. Naomi. His voice lowered. What are you talking about? Before I could respond, another voice came faintly through his phone, calling his name urgently. Papers shuffled loudly. Ethan, someone said. The insurance provider officially withdrew coverage. His breathing became uneven. I have to go, he said quickly. Please, just come home. We'll talk. We'll fix this. Home. I looked around the small apartment. I already did, I said quietly. I ended the call. The phone didn't stay silent long. It rang again almost immediately. This time I answered faster. Ms. Carter. Daniel Reed's voice was very controlled, but underneath it was urgency. "You found me quickly," I said. "I should have realized sooner," he replied. "Your communication patterns stopped the same hour you left the residence registered under Blake family property. You track patterns carefully." "I track survival," he said plainly. "Multiple divisions rely on your assessments. You disappeared without notice." "I retired," I answered. He didn't react for a second. "I don't believe that." "You don't have to." "Ms. Carter," he said, and his tone softened slightly. "3 companies already triggered risk alerts today. You know what will happen if this continues?" "Yes." "Then you understand why I need to meet you immediately." I thought for a moment. "Come to my address," I said, and I gave it to him. He paused. "You're not at the Blake residence?" "No." "I see." The call ended. I returned the phone to the table and opened my laptop. Notifications filled the screen. Alerts, contract warnings, automatic financial triggers activating across several networks. I didn't touch any of them. For 2 years, I had responded within minutes. Today, I watched them pass. Time moved slowly. Then, about an hour later, a car door slammed outside the building. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. Not hesitant like Charles, not rushed like Ethan, precise. A knock followed. I opened the door. Daniel Reed stood there in a dark suit, eyes sharp, posture straight. He looked exactly like the kind of man people listened to without question. But the moment he saw me, he stopped. Not surprised, not confused, certain. "It's you," he said. "Yes." He entered after I stepped aside. He looked around the small apartment once, carefully noting everything, then faced me again. "You've spoken to me for 2 years," he said calmly. "I know your decision patterns, your negotiation methods, your timing." He paused. "I expected someone much older." "I get that often," I replied. He didn't smile. "Do you understand what your absence has already caused in less than 12 hours? "Yes." "And you're willing to let it continue?" I met his eyes. "I warned you many times not to rely on a single unseen support." He nodded slowly. "You did. I assumed you were protecting anonymity." "I was protecting balance." He folded his arms. "Why stop now?" "Because my reason for staying no longer exists." He studied my face. "Your husband." I didn't answer. "That company," he said carefully, "was not your responsibility." "No," I agreed. "It was my choice." "And now your choice is to watch it collapse?" "I am watching reality continue without interference." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something softer. "He regrets it." I looked at him. "He doesn't understand it yet," I replied. Another knock sounded on the door. Not calm, not controlled, desperate. I didn't move immediately, but the knocking continued, louder. "Naomi, I know you're inside." "Ethan." Daniel looked at me. "You expected this?" he said. "Yes." I walked to the door and opened it. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, tie loose, hair messy like he had run his hands through it 100 times. He looked past me and saw Daniel inside the apartment. His eyes widened. "Mr. Reed?" Daniel didn't speak. Ethan looked back at me, then around the apartment, then back at me again. "You're living here?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He stepped inside slowly, like he wasn't sure the floor would hold him. He looked at the small couch, the table, the single bedroom door. "You chose this," he said, confused. "I chose peace." He swallowed. "Naomi, everyone keeps talking like you're connected to this. Dad won't explain. The bank asked about you. Mr. Reed is here. I just need you to tell me what's happening." I didn't answer immediately. He took a step closer. "Please." I picked up my phone from the table. Then I opened a secure application. Then I handed it to him. "Look." He stared at the screen. At first, he didn't react. Then his eyes moved quickly across the page. Authorization records, financial protections, legal guarantees, signed under initials. NC. His face slowly lost color. His hands trembled slightly. This, he whispered, this is Blake Holdings' emergency financial protection. Yes. He looked at me, then back at the phone, then at Daniel. Daniel gave a small nod. Ethan's voice barely came out. You? I said gently. Yes. His lips parted, but no words came. He sank slowly into the chair. For the first time since I met him. Ethan Blake looked small. Ethan stayed in the chair for a long time without speaking. He kept staring at the phone in his hand like it might change if he waited long enough. The room was quiet except for the fan above us and the faint sound of traffic outside. I don't understand, he finally said. His voice was softer than I had ever heard it. You signed these? He asked again, scrolling through the records. All of them. Yes. These guarantees, they go back 2 years. Yes. His eyes moved across the screen again. I could almost see his mind walking backward through every success he had celebrated, every deal he had proudly told people he secured himself. The Harrington lawsuit, he whispered. I settled it. The Singapore investors, I kept them. The shipping strike last winter, I rerouted your suppliers. He slowly lifted his eyes to me. So every time I thought I saved the company, I finished gently, you were being protected. The words did not hurt him all at once. They hurt him slowly, because they were not insults. They were truth. He placed the phone carefully on the table like it was fragile. Why? He asked quietly. Daniel remained silent near the window. Charles had returned and now stood by the door, listening without interrupting. No one else spoke. Ethan was asking me, not them. I sat across from him. Because when I first studied your company, I said, I saw it was close to collapsing. Not because of evil decisions, but because of confident ones. You believed problems would fix themselves. They did, he said weakly. Yes, I answered, because I fixed them. He lowered his gaze. I met you to understand who was making those decisions, I continued. Then I stayed because you were kind. He looked up quickly. You laughed easily. You cared about your employees. You weren't cruel. You just never noticed how close things came to breaking. Charles slowly sank into a chair nearby, covering his mouth with his hand as realization deepened across his face. Ethan asked, You married me because of the company? No, I shook my head. I married you because I hoped you would one day see me. His expression tightened. I saw you. You loved me, I corrected softly, but you didn't respect me. He didn't argue. He couldn't. The memory of the dinner was sitting between us like a person in the room. You believed I depended on you, I said, so I stayed quiet. I wanted to know something important. What? He whispered. Would you value me without knowing my worth? He stared at the floor. And I failed, he said. I didn't answer. Silence sometimes says enough. He rubbed his forehead slowly. All those times. When I joked. When I said I took care of you. I let you, I replied gently. I didn't need credit. I only needed respect. His voice broke slightly. And last night, yes. He nodded weakly, remembering. You wouldn't survive a month without me. I didn't look away from him. That was the moment I understood, I said quietly. You didn't see me as a partner. You saw me as someone safe to stand above. Charles spoke for the first time, his voice low and heavy. Naomi, when you left and withdrew the guarantees, everything began collapsing within hours. Yes, Ethan looked up quickly. You did this on purpose. I shook my head. No, I stopped interfering on purpose. There's a difference. Daniel finally spoke calmly from near the window. The company isn't failing because she attacked it, he said. It's failing because it was never standing on its own. Ethan leaned back in the chair, his eyes distant. So my success wasn't mine. It was yours in effort, I said, but not instability. His hands tightened. "'Cause everyone respected me," he whispered. "They respected results," Daniel corrected gently. "She ensured those results." Ethan breathed in slowly, like the air was heavy. Then he asked the question he had been avoiding. "Are you going to let it fall?" I looked at him carefully. "What do you think I should do?" "Help us," he said immediately. Then his voice weakened. "Please." There was no pride left in his eyes now, only honesty. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he answered differently than before. "Not because of the company," he said. "Because I hurt you." I waited. "I didn't realize what you were giving," he continued quietly. "I thought I was protecting you. I never imagined you were protecting me." His voice trembled slightly. "I never even asked what you wanted." The room was silent again. He looked around the small apartment. "You left everything without taking a single thing from that house." "I took what was mine," I said softly. He understood. "Yourself," he said. I nodded. He lowered his head. "I can't undo what I said," he whispered. "I can't pretend I respected you the way I should have." "No," I agreed gently. "But I do now," he said. I didn't answer immediately, because this was the moment the entire story had been moving toward. Not the business, not the money, the truth. "I don't need you to admire my abilities," I told him. "I needed you to value my presence." He nodded slowly. "I was proud of what I provided," he said. "I didn't realize you never asked for any of it." "I asked for partnership," I replied. His eyes finally filled with something real, not fear of losing his company, but fear of losing me. "And now?" he asked. Well, I stood and walked to the window, watching the afternoon sunlight stretch across the street. "Now," I said quietly, "you have to live one day without the protection you never knew existed." He didn't interrupt. "You told me I wouldn't survive a month without you," I continued, "but the question was never whether I could live without you." I turned to face him. "It was whether you could live without me." No one spoke. After a long moment, I walked to the table and opened my laptop. All three men watched silently. I logged into the secure system again. Notifications flooded the screen, red alerts, suspended contracts, emergency flags. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Ethan stood slowly. "Naomi, whatever you decide, I won't stop you." I looked at him. For the first time, there was no assumption in his eyes, no ownership, just respect. I typed one authorization line. Not a full restoration, not the old protection, just enough to stop immediate collapse. Charles let out a long breath he had been holding. Daniel closed his eyes briefly in relief. Ethan didn't celebrate. He just watched me. I closed the laptop. "The company will not fall today," I said calmly, "but it will stand on its own from now on." He nodded. "And us?" he asked quietly. I met his gaze. "That," I said gently, "will also have to be rebuilt properly, or not rebuilt at all." He accepted the answer. Not as a husband demanding forgiveness, but as a man finally understanding the woman he married. Because for the first time, Ethan Blake was not looking at someone who needed him. He was looking at someone who chose whether to stay. I stood by the window, sunlight warming my face, feeling a strange calm I hadn't felt in years. The house behind me, once a gilded cage, was silent, empty, and free. I had left everything, but I had kept myself. For the first time, I realized that life wasn't about proving my worth to anyone, not even to the man I loved. It was about claiming it quietly, on my own terms. Ethan approached slowly, not with anger, not with demands, but with something I had never seen in him before: understanding. He didn't reach for control. He didn't try to fix me. He only stood beside me, letting me exist as I chose. The company survived the day because I allowed it to learn to stand on its own. That, I thought, was the true measure of strength, Not power over others, but the courage to let go. I turned to Ethan and smiled softly. "We can rebuild," I said. "Together, if you're ready. Or apart, if you're not." He nodded, finally seeing me for who I truly was. And in that moment, I knew. Survival wasn't about wealth, control, or dependence. Survival was knowing your own worth and never letting anyone, not even love, take it from you. For the first time in my life, I felt entirely free. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting revenge stories.